Once you
Yeah, once you set up, you should.
That's right. Once you hit record, you don't need to see me.
I think you're already
Yeah,
recording,
yeah,
right?
I think that's gonna work.
Are you
Yeah.
recording?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
recording.
Okay, great.
Wow.
No one touched the chair.
Wonderful.
Don't
Okay,
breathe on me.
so welcome to weaving feminine leadership into global masculine paradigms. And this is new material for me, so I'm going to experiment with just how this flows. And basically, for the last 10 years, I've been gathering different information from different teachers and really looking at how, my experience has been with master teachers in different modalities, both academic, shamanic, tantric, and others, and how they held the masculine and feminine principles within their style of teaching and leading and being mentors. In the last few years, also connecting with the business world and having business mentors and looking at that structure of leadership. And in terms of my personal journey, I'm really seeing how psychedelics is a modality to assist in opening up our authentic truth and how we connect with the world. And that it makes sense that once we tap into that authenticity and we actually connect in with our power, that then we'll be able to step in as authentic leaders. Now, the piece in between this progression is whether it's embodied or not. So we see a lot of academic teachers and leaders knowing a lot of information, and they can actually transmit that information very well. And there could be a disconnect in terms of how it's embodied within themselves. And this really speaks to the feminine principle, because I feel like in order to weave these energies together, it really does need to be embodied, as the body contains all of the universe, all of what we know, including our ancestral lineage, cultural background, and our families, and all that makes us who we are. So just the embodied piece, I see is often missing. And so really wanting to focus on how can different tools, including psychedelics, assist in this embodied piece. And once we feel like we have our wholeness, so we're bringing all these pieces maybe that we're missing along the way, and we have this wholeness within ourselves, and how do we align the energies so that the flow is actually in its most beneficial, powerful movement of energy, then how do we step out in a bigger way into our communities, into the world, and how do we express our mission? So part of my mission is to really link embodied spirituality with people's vision in leadership. And part of this is to reconnect with the earth and reconnect with our bodies. And so this being a rooting of our vision so that we can rise up with vitality in leadership. What I've done is I have come up with 9 themes of what I see as integrative leadership. And the first, I'll just run through the 9 and then we'll go deeper into each one. So the first one being tradition versus innovation. The second is around relationship and creativity. The third is empowering voices. Fourth, compassion, mutual respect. The fifth, expressive transparency, which is authentic. The sixth is the vision, whether the vision is focused on process versus goal orientated. Seventh is enlightened mission. The eighth is destiny. And ninth is the unknown. Okay, so back to number one, tradition versus innovation. A weaving of the macro and the micro. And so there has been this debate, and you probably have witnessed it in the psychedelic realm in terms of, old traditional ways of learning about, plant teachers and journeying within the spiritual world, and this is under the category of, for instance, the ayahuasca traditions, the Shipibo, the Shuar, for example, and then the TP meetings with peyote. And that's just to name a few. So these traditions have come from hundreds, thousands of years of exploring these particular wisdoms in very strict settings. There's very definite roles of who the shaman is, who the clients or the patients are, what is the role of a shaman or a vegetalista, curandero, and typically that they are chosen by the community and they're chosen by spirit. So it's not this contemporary, I want to be a shaman kind of situation. It's either you're born into it or the community chooses you, and there's very definite roles of what you are meant to do in terms of serving the community, and that these plant teachers or psychedelics are tools in order to assist you in achieving your goals in the community. And so that's the traditional way. Now there's this whole wave of neo-shamanism in the psychedelic world where people are transmuting these practices and they are using plants and substances in very different ways. For instance, in North America, having all these different kinds of ceremonies that are more participatory. You have people going down, say, to South America and learning for 3 months, and they think that they're a shaman, and then they lead their groups. And I've heard debates and arguments along the whole continuum, and people get very passionate about it. And speaking with the shamans in South America, they one of the themes that I've heard from them is that they've sort of given up hope that Westerners really want to take the time to learn the traditional way, and that this is a very fast Western entitled culture that's going to South America wanting enlightenment, and that as long as the shamans are going to be paid for it, well, they're going to give the Westerners what they want, and they sort of hold it very lightly, and they some very well intentioned, they really do want to be in service and help people that come to them. And then there's others who are giving them what the people need, and yet only on a superficial level. Like they're not really gonna share the secrets of their culture because they don't know how sincere these people are. Traditionally, for instance, in the Shipibo world of training, is that it's considered a lifelong path. You connect with the teacher who then guides you through various initiations, and a process might look like 3 months of learning about a plant, many plant teachers, and then you go into a year plant diet, and that's it's a practice in the vegetalismo world, which I won't get into, but you do that for a year, and then the teacher asks you to actually be a student. So you go through at least a year and a half of I guess just experiencing and connecting, and the teacher watches and sees how you do. That's an arduous journey sometimes, and so it makes sense because you want the people who are committed. Just similar to, I hear in law school that after the first year, 60% of the students are weeded out, something like that. I don't know if that's true, but that kind of weeding out process to really get the dedicated people. And so, in my experience in training with the Shipibo, I obviously, being born in North America, having a Western upbringing, my roots are Ecuadorian, so there was a sense of like connecting back to my culture in studying the plant teachers in vegetalismo, and recognizing that I'm very limited in terms of how deep I can go, because typically the training included, a year in the jungle in isolation. You go out with like a knife and maybe a few pieces of clothing, and that's it. That's not what we're going to be doing at this time. And so the teacher that I connected with created a model where Westerners could learn. And that did include, for myself, a 3-month isolation diet in Peru, and also social dieting, which means that we can learn about the plant teachers while still remaining in our regular lives in North America and having jobs and families and taking care of business in that way. And so this teacher was acknowledging that there was a need for his tradition. He's a traditional Ayahuasquero. The need for transmuting his practice in order to really transfer his wisdom to others who were sincere, and that would do a lot of good in terms of how that permeated out into all these countries around the world. So he had students from all over the world. And he was also knowledgeable in the fact that Westerners have a different type of mentality, and that maybe could be seen as more like independent or rebellious, whichever way you want to see it, and that he encouraged us to really integrate all of our knowledge bases. So if we were trained in acupuncture or Reiki, or if we were an academic, he's like, yes, really make sure that you hone those skills and integrate them somehow into your shamanic vegetalismo practice. So he actually, interestingly enough, had very traditional views in terms of what we needed to do in the training, but was open-minded in really encouraging us to take contemporary pathways to be in service in our communities. And that's what I appreciate about this particular teacher. I mean, he really set us up in a good way, so we could hold both the traditional and the contemporary. I used to be very judgmental about the neo-shamanic ways, and with some of the circles in Hawaii that I heard about where everyone's singing Kumbaya together, and I was like, people just don't realize how deep traditional circle can go in terms of transformation. And I thought that was too superficial, these other circles, and that people were missing out. It wasn't like I was judging that they wanted it. I just knew what was possible and that they weren't going to realize that. As well as hearing about these circles in Los Angeles, where there were 400 people who were, paid $600 each for these huge ayahuasca journeys with strobe lights and video images playing, and I was like, that is absurd. Now, over the years, through many humbling experiences, I've softened my opinion, and being less judgmental, really trusting the intelligence of these plants and psychedelics, and that there's a reason why they're permeating out in the way they are, and trusting that there is a greater wisdom that's unfolding, and that I don't need to understand it. And people have different needs at different times, and there's different ways of fulfilling those needs. And some might really benefit from these 400-person ayahuasca journeys. I just don't know, right? And so I soften in that way, and then also, really putting energy into, okay, so what is it that I feel is most appropriate for people? And that's where I'm like, okay, I'm going to be in service in this way because I feel it aligns with how I want to express myself in the world. And, a concrete example is that in some of the circles that I lead, that there is one night of a traditional Shipibo, ritual, and then there's one night where the contemporary, more flexible, shared circling is experienced. So within myself and the way that I create circles, I weave both in, because I see that it's really beneficial for people to be able to express themselves in circles. So a traditional circle, everyone's quiet except for the leader. Contemporary one, people get to express themselves through sound, through movement, and I see that it can be so profoundly healing for people to be able to express themselves and sing. Something so simple can be so transformative. Okay, so that's a long spiel. Number 2, relationships and creativity. So really looking at the energy cords that we have in our relationships, and how is that either in terms of masculine and feminine, how is that either competitive or collaborative? Now, I've been trained in a group that actually, surprisingly, was quite competitive, and also in the academic world, quite competitive. And I was confused about that, because I just assumed that healers are collaborative and sharing resources and really having each other's backs. It was quite a shock to realize, as I went deeper into the shamanic path, that actually shamanism is a path of power. It's not a path necessarily of healing. And so what shamanism is learning about energy. And once you have that, just a sense of that knowledge, then you can actually learn in this material realm what energy cords means with the different people, and you can learn how to either manipulate for your benefit or to actually transform for the benefit of the other person. So this whole notion of light and dark continuum, and that it's very easy to be in that middle place where you have to be mindful of choosing the light path. So this is where the dark magic comes in, and in the Shipibo tradition, it's very persistent. It's real to them, and so just acknowledging that whatever tradition you're training in, or in the psychedelic world, whoever you are sitting with, that energy will transform the way that you are perceiving your relationship with both the substance and then the world. There is an energetic cord there. And so, in some ways, my soul decided that I needed a bit of that masculine competitive information. And so I had years of that where I was immersed with all male teachers, and it was very much of you know, I'm separation, I'm the teacher, you know, and you're the student. Lots of learning around discipline. So, again, you know, this second energy center that is related to relationships, really learning how, you know, boundaries are important, and then the discipline of keeping one's boundaries to nurture healthy relationships. So I needed years of that training. And then it was maybe 10 years of that, where I was like, you know what, I want to learn what it is to actually be in collaboration and more of the feminine, you know, flow with the group. And so was able to connect with people who were trained in different traditions, and contemporary traditions here in North America, and be really pleased to be able to connect with them and learn what collaboration looks like in community. And so linking up with people in different projects, and being much more creative, having a lot of freedom to be creative together. And so basically, in order to experience that, I needed to leave the teachers that I had. I needed to leave certain communities that I was connected with, that were immersed in that kind of culture, and branch out onto my own. And in order to do that, I needed the number 3, the empowering voices. I needed to tap into my power in order to venture off into the world. And some people would say, you know, you really need a teacher, a master teacher at your back, you know, as you're traversing these realms. And luckily, you know, I did have them. I gained a lot from them, and I felt like I was strong enough to connect directly with the plant or psychedelic as my teacher, so that direct connection was going to be a strong enough lead or guide for me. And so in that transition of leaving behind, you know, it's a typical, you know, story of the dark night of the soul. You know, you're tested, and then you're able to like venture off into your own and like learn, you know, what is it that I have, you know, within myself that that I need to be in the world in a strong way. And so so it was great to actually be able to learn from these other groups, you know, in a collaborative way, because I felt more empowered, I felt more seen, respected for my authenticity. I was able to just be myself, you know, not worry about making wrong moves, you know, in certain teaching contexts. So I was able to blossom, and then having that support, really being able to then move myself into my heart energy center. And this is where I noticed that I was dropping some previous judgments that I had about people, about traditions and circles and methodologies, and I was able to tap into my heart and actually have greater respect and humility, that we all have our own piece in this puzzle, and that we're all important, and that it's okay. So I had this sense of like relaxation happen. And once I could release you know, some of the, you know, the darker pieces within myself, and see where I was leaking energy, you know, and this is like the 3rd energy center, so where I was leaking energy, filling in those gaps, then I could have this sense of peace within myself, within my body, within my place in community, and within the world. So I could basically, the freedom, what is freedom? Being yourself and being able to just express yourself fully. And so I was able to do that. I went from moving into, you know, the 6th energy center with expression and transparency. I was able to go from crying when I was asked to sing in a circle, to being able to speak in front of hundreds of people and feeling excited about it. So this opened up a whole new world to me, because once I was able to just be myself and say what I needed to say, the feminine flow really came through, because I could trust. I was, you know, connecting with my intuition. I could trust myself, trust that everything was gonna be okay. And that's when I could actually see people relating to me differently in the world. And they would say that they felt better just sitting beside me. They wanted to know the whole thing of like, what did you eat for breakfast or for dinner? You know, in that movie where I want what she's having. I think she was having an orgasm or something in the restaurant. Then people would come up, I don't know what you do or whatever, but I just want to learn from you. I want to do what you do. And that was a sign that I was on the right track. Okay, so, and then moving, let's see. Oh, right. Part of this authentic expression was actually being able to out myself and out my shamanic community and out my teachers where there had been a misuse of power in different forms, including sexuality. And this is so in 2010, I spoke at the MAPS conference and for the first time was able to speak about the sexual misconduct and abuse that happens in ceremonies. And you know, it had been going on for a while, but no one was actually speaking about it at conferences. No one was writing about it in the psychedelic world. Well, then after that, it was great because more and more people were speaking about it, sharing, you know, women were being able to share their stories, and there was then a collection of this information, which then outed more and more teachers. This happens in all kinds of spiritual traditions across the board. So more people were able to get the information they needed before going to a certain practitioner or a certain leader, so that they could, you know, protect their physical space and not have the trauma of sexual misconduct. So, you know, this was empowering for the community at large. Oh yeah. So in terms of the vision, the idea of what's more important, the process or the goal, one of the things that I noticed is that having a lot of masculine teachers in masculine structures, that the focus was very much on we are going here as fast and hard as we can. And I now relate that to capitalism and some of the money structures that we have. It's like fast and hard, and who cares who's left behind, right? So I was seeing that, you know, coming from situations where people, they wanted to sincerely help people, and they would prefer to help 100 people, and I mean, amazing transformations were happening, but leave 2 bleeding people behind. Either they were sexually molested, or they were shamed for speaking out against something or whatever. So they were left behind and everyone else was moving forward. And you see this expressed in the way that, you know, people are traveling the world. So we live in a fast-paced world. So people are traveling a lot and holding these different circles and teaching a lot. And at its best, it's, you know, empowering for all these communities. At its worst, you have people coming in and out and sort of rock star mentality, right, of shaking everything up and everyone's dazzled, except for the few that are traumatized, right? And that this is where the integration piece was missing, that there wasn't enough integration. Once these healers, leaders left, and the community was sort of left with this bag of whatever, of confusion. So the whole idea of like what's more important to whatever tribe you're with, is it process or is it goal? Like what is the goal? And, you know, really seeing that a community is only as strong as its weakest link. And, you know, this is a lifelong learning for myself of like, and I don't have an answer to it. Like, how does a community really come together and learn with each other and take care of everyone? I think it's like it's a human general question, right? Like, how are we all living together in this earth? And it's just that in these spiritual communities, one being psychedelic, that you get to see it right up and, front and close to you. Okay, so 7th, enlightened mission. And the idea of mutual commitment to sustainability. So, as I said, part of my mission being in service in a way that I wish I had the opportunity when I began on this path. So, offering communities something that is integrative, it's empowering, it's connected to earth so that it's sustainable, and really shifting gears and like, okay, so what am I going to offer in terms of like programs, and in a concrete way, looking at, okay, I offer this kind of program that happens to include plant teachers or psychedelics, as opposed to like I'm traveling with different medicines. I'm not a traveling person. I bow to those that can do that, travel and be immersed in a lot of people, but I need to keep it very focused and really give energy to people who it's going to be actually sustainable and transformative and sort of be done well. So I'm really looking at the value of long term. So I'm more interested in process is what I realized. And so, and then seeing like, what does integration mean for me? So that is integrating the pieces within myself so that I'm like a whole person, being able to be authentic, and then integrating the pieces of, for clients, the preparation, the actual experience of, say, a journey, and then the post-integration. So having that whole piece take place within 3 to 6 months to a year to 4 years. And seeing that these folks that are actually really committed to themselves in that way are blossoming and stepping into new levels of leadership that we never even knew was possible, like just popping with their gifts and feeling supported by a community and cheered on, by all of us, and sharing our resources so that this can happen. And I'm not saying it's 100%, there's lots of little glitches along the way that I'm fortunate to have people close to me that I can reflect and go into those, shadowy places, those tricky places, and find our way through it together. So it's a continual learning process. And so the 8th is destiny, and I like to ask the question of ask you, what are you willing to die for? It really gets to that essential question, because, tapping into the question of what are we living for? It's like, what are we willing to die for? It's the same, different sides of the same coin. So, a short story in that I was dieting plants in the jungle for 3 months in isolation, where we're just in a tombo, it's just us, and we're drinking these plants. We don't eat that much, that some food is brought to us, and the idea is to really connect in with the energy of the plant, and then have this strengthening of our connection with spirit. So physically I became very weak, spiritually I became very strong, and after the 3 months, it's strange, but I had this feeling of, I left the jungle knowing that if I had to choose 2 things to walk in the world with, like 2 material things, it would be a pipe and tobacco and an iPhone. And that was my realization of integration between the spiritual and the material realms. And I knew I was going to be living in this material community, and I was being asked to step up in a certain way, and I needed to learn certain things like business skills and software skills and, you know, computer skills and how to build a team and things like that. And so if I had my iPhone, I would have access to everything I needed, you know, in terms of banking and things like that. And then with the tobacco, just knowing that, well, tobacco is such a powerful plant, and that if I had the two of these, I would be able to be a bridge between the worlds. And that sense of faith, this was like maybe 7 years ago, it has been my foundation and carried me through the tricky times. And really made me like passionate and actually optimistic that it's possible for us to be in service authentically in the way that we really are called to be, and that we're gonna be okay, that we're gonna thrive, that we can thrive in all these like global changes that are happening with war and poverty and environmental changes, everything. So I have this like enduring trust in the universe, and that trust is here within myself. Okay, and this leads to the ninth, the unknown. So the paradigm transformation, and I won't say much about the unknown because I don't know. But there's something in there about the significance of the rise of the feminine power that will be woven into these masculine structures, and that once we tap into that and we become artful in that, we will thrive globally. Yes.